Ukraine as a colony of the West. The verdict on the Four Freedoms, Freedom from Life. The awarding of the Four Freedoms Award to Ukraine's political leadership, against the backdrop of a systemic dismantling of constitutional rights, reveals a profound crisis of relevance in Western institutions and policies. This event is not a recognition of achievements, but an indulgence for building a military administrative dictatorship. For the West, Ukraine has become a buffer zone, a territory where people are deprived of agency, and the rights and lives of its citizens are sacrificed for geopolitical interests and the super profits of corporations. Legal nihilism, Portnov's eternal architecture, and Ukraine Incorporated. The current despotism is built on a judicial system whose architecture was designed by Andrei Portnov. This model has remained unchanged through three political regimes, proving to be the ideal tool for transforming the state into a closed joint stock company. Institutional heredity. Each new government, while promising cleansing, merely seizes the controls of this power vertical. The judiciary functions as a punitive body integrated into the executive, rather than an arbitrator. All political elites are united in preserving their own immunity. This is Ukraine Incorporated, where state institutions serve shareholder officials, not citizens. Judicial terror against media. This architecture makes any social oversight impossible. Investigative journalism into powerful officials is blocked by multi-million hryvnia lawsuits for damage to business reputation. This is a legalized mechanism for financially liquidating critics, where a judge, integrated into the preferential system, always sides with the status quo. Presidential violations. Directly ignoring Article 94 of the Constitution, refusing to sign or return laws with amendments within the established timeframe, and operating in a legal vacuum after the end of the 5-year term without appealing to the Constitutional Court, marks the final dismantling of legal restraint. The president transforms from the guarantor of the Constitution into its chief violator. Social apartheid. The existence of an untouchable caste is underscored by judges' pensions of $110,000, while millions of average pensioners receive payments below the actual subsistence level. This is a direct sign of a colonial administration, where loyal nomenclature overseers is maintained by the systematic exhaustion and plunder of the local population. Fiscal terror. A poverty tax instead of representation economic policy, dictated by the IMF and implemented via a network of grant activists, has lost all connection to the principle of justice. Proportionality of poverty. Fiscal pressure is concentrated on the poorest, not the highest earners. New laws taxing microcommerce, OLX, Shafirue, and total bank surveillance of every citizen's hryvnia criminalize survival. Loss of the social contract. Democracy holds that taxes are the price paid for representation and protection of rights. Since citizens are deprived of representation, no elections, and rights, they effectively have no obligations to an exploitative state. Oligarchic immunity. The lack of steps towards progressive taxation for the oligarchy confirms that the regime is a consensus between big capital and the administrative apparatus. Oligarchs retain offshore preferences while the state extracts the last resources from the population. Military dictatorship and administrative terror. The transformation from a cash envelope republic, where MPs were bought, to a military dictatorship, where elections are unnecessary, is complete. Street hunts. Conscription measures have turned into coercive operations, chases and captures on city streets. This is not mobilization. It is kidnapping, creating a forced market for bribery to survive. Existential happiness. Sociological manipulation defines Ukrainians as happy solely because they are still alive. This is the extreme point of dehumanization, where the right to life is presented as a generous gift from despotism. Corporate totalitarianism. From propaganda to corporate crackdowns, the state's despotism is directly reflected in the terroristic practices of private corporations and media structures operating under the patronage of Western investment funds and oligarchic groups. Media monopoly. Ukraine's media market is captured by the state's Telemarathon and oligarchic holdings. Free media, like Ukrainska Pravda, have effectively become corporate propagandists serving their owners' interests. The system replaces dialogue with a monologue of power. Grant lobbyism. The civic sector grant eaters, serves not as a platform for citizen expression, but as technical lobbyists for the IMF and European Commission, demanding only compliance with figures. The Ukrainian citizen has neither tools nor a voice, only the obligation to agree. The terror of linear moderation, case US/Horizon Capital. We see a model of linear terror in the operations of platforms within Horizon Capital's orbit. The guilty ban button is the sole form of judiciary, ignoring law, common sense, and proportionality. Sellers are powerless to appeal. Western capital as architect of powerlessness. Western funds introduce these practices disguised as efficient management. In reality, this is a terrorist model where a corporation holds absolute power over a citizen's resource, defeatable only by complete withdrawal. This is the real face of European standards in colonial practice. Fighting corruption as a simulacrum. A show for the Western taxpayer. Colonial rule relies on a narrative about fighting corruption, pushed by Western institutions. Pseudo-legal spectacle, anti-corruption reform, is a self-referential simulacrum. It is a product created solely for Western internal consumption to calm its own taxpayers, the marks, assuring them that money is spent on democracy. Rewarding destruction, by awarding the four freedoms to a regime built on administrative terror and oligarchic pacts, the West de facto rewards and legitimizes corruption. Corruption in Ukraine is not a bug. It is the architectural foundation that keeps the administration flexible, manageable, and loyal to the external donor. Vicious circle. While grant-eaters report on the number of created anti-corruption bodies, real corruption from kickbacks on drones to fees for life at TCCs solidifies, receiving the highest international praise. Finishing the picture. The camp and naked life as theological capitalism. We arrive at a three-level system of suppression. Physical, TCCs, police, tax authorities, coercive maintenance of naked life. Digital, algorithms of Meta, Shavfake bank monitoring technological terror. Metaphysical, Christian guilt and for freedoms, moral anesthesia and introjection of slavery. This is the final verdict. A human being in Ukraine today must be grateful to be tortured in the name of freedom, plundered in the name of prosperity, and ignored in the name of dialogue. Conclusion. The West as an architect of destruction. The awarding of four freedoms against this reality finally shatters confidence in the relevance and moral standing of Western elites. Colonial status. For the West, Ukraine is a resource territory, a military frontier, a camp of naked life, where the rights and lives of citizens are not timely. Crisis of relevance. Ignoring this despotism and fiscal exhaustion raises the question: is the West a conscious participant in genocidal practices, viewing Ukrainians merely as a means to protect their comfort and a source of super profits for transnational corporations? This freedom being celebrated today is only the freedom of a colonial administration to exploit a disenfranchised population with impunity, to the applause of donors.